Hello guys, it is Gate of Theories here, and we are one episode away from the finale of Season 5 of Riverdale. This season hasn't been the best season by any means, and it kind of just feels like Riverdale just doesn't know what they want to do with this show anymore, but they did still do something that most seasons have all done before, and by now just seems like a season tradition, and that is the infamous musical episode. These musical episodes are by far the most hated and low-rated episodes in all of Riverdale, which just makes you question why they keep on creating them. But Season 5's musical episode for once actually surprised me, and I didn't even mind it. I could even say it was good. And this all got me thinking about all of the dreadful musical episodes we've gotten over the years, and today I thought we'd look back at them and see whether any of them actually worked or were they all just a hopeless wreck. But before we go any further, please make sure that you click that red subscribe button down below and have your notifications turned on so that you get notified every time we make any brand new Riverdale videos. Let's start with Season 1, and thank goodness this season did not have a musical episode. Especially with Season 1 being the shortest and most self-contained, it would just feel very out of place in this dark thriller teen show. But that still didn't stop the show from having one-off songs in each episode, which I guess is fine as the main character back then did mainly focus on music. But then we have Season 2 with the first musical episode, Carrie. It's the height of Season 2, we're dealing with Hiram Lodge, Serpents and the Black Hood, in my opinion Riverdale's peak, and suddenly it's all interrupted because the kids at Riverdale High want to perform Carrie the musical. To be fair, Carrie does take place in a high school and is about a teenager with an abusive mother, so you could make the stretch of Betty and her father who's abusing people, but it does just feel like an out of place episode, especially since we're at the height of the Black Hood's power, and is only there because the show wanted to do a musical episode. Which is fair enough, most teen shows do eventually have a musical episode, but does that mean they should have kept doing them? Because if this was a one-time thing, I wouldn't have even mattered much. And it's kind of like a nice break for an episode to show something a bit different to what we're used to. And there are some really good bits in this musical episode. It's more like you escape into the musical and then jump back in right at the end where a murder is put straight on stage in front of people, which brings the scale of the situation back up high and reminds you you are watching Riverdale. So if this was the only musical episode, I wouldn't have really mattered because it was just a nice change for a episode. And before I said the musical episodes were the lowest rated episodes, they are, but this musical episode is actually the highest rated at 5.7 out of 10, which is very high for the musical episodes as it is a continuous downhill stretch from here, but compared to Season 2 where Riverdale was at its height with episodes being in the high 8s and 9s out of 10s, it really sticks out like a sore thumb. And Riverdale clearly didn't learn because then they decided to do another musical episode, and from here on, the musical episodes begin to get worse and worse. This time, the characters go off and perform Heathers the Musical during the height of Griffins and Gargoyles, the Gargoyle King, the rise of the farm, and just before Cheryl and Tony join the farm, and also Josie and Archie's sort of relationship thing that they have in this season. I will give it credit that it does actually make a callback to the Season 2 musical episode, in which Kevin keeps on calling back to the murder of Midge, so I guess that's good, but that's about the only good thing. It's full of cringy and unnecessary moments throughout the episode that just don't sit right with this show. Also, some of the characters can sing very well, but unfortunately some cannot. However, this one doesn't feel so out of place like the last one did, as it's kind of used to set up how big and horrific the farm has grew to, with that creepy scene at the end where everyone stands up and claps and you can see Betty's terrified and shocked face. I will give these episodes one thing, and that's the endings are always huge cliffhangers. But it still does feel very odd to have a musical episode during the height of Season 3. A similar type of episode in Season 3 to this one is Prom Night, which in my opinion is much better. It's the one where Betty ends up facing the Black Hood and the Gargoyle King in the school. What could be better? But again, the ratings go down to a very low 4.2 out of 10, but that is actually very high for one of the musical episodes. Because next season we come to the worst possible musical episode Riverdale has ever produced. Season 4 wasn't exactly the best season ever, but it had some good stuff in it. This episode, however, is just so bad that it kind of brings the entire season down, and that's not even an overstatement. This was the lowest rated episode of Riverdale ever until this year's musical episode has taken its place, and this is really where these musical episodes hit the peak of how bad they could get. Like, it's actually hard to watch this episode because of how unbearable it is, and that is Headwig and the Angry Inch. Firstly, I completely agree with the themes and lessons from this episode that everyone should just be able to express themselves and be whoever they identify as without higher powers stopping them. The message is a great one, but this episode portrays it so poorly in such a laughable way that it really does not do the message any justice. As usual, the musical episode feels out of place and like a bad filler episode because the writers didn't know how to fit a musical episode into this season. It comes straight after the locked room, which is basically where the entire mystery of season 4 with Stonewall and the Jughead death situation is all solved, and the locked room is an 8.5 out of 10 compared to this episode's 3.5 out of 10. It's a huge tone shift, and this isn't just an error with the episode, but rather season 4 itself, and that's because this season basically ended after this locked room episode. But since the Stonewall mystery didn't fill a full season, they needed to create a new mystery, and so we got the VHS tapes, which I think is a really good idea for a mystery, but then clearly they didn't have plans for them, as season 5's reveal for who was behind it all was just so boring and unexciting. So this musical episode is kind of tasked with setting up the next potential villain, Mr. Honey, as currently the characters think he's behind these VHS tapes. Now that would be fine, but it doesn't help that Mr. Honey is one of the most one-dimensional characters the show has ever created, and is only there so that the audience can hate a character. And that's basically all the episode does. You have Kevin wanting to put on the musical and express himself, but Mr. Honey basically is just saying no. And that's about it. The entire episode is just the characters getting annoyed at Mr. Honey, which would work if Mr. Honey actually had a personality, a motive, a story, but he just doesn't whatsoever. And you can tell it's a setup episode because 2 episodes later, you have the dream episode Killing Mr. Honey, where they plot to kill Mr. Honey because he's so horrible and they get him banished from the school. Now that episode is actually pretty good, but it's relying on this musical episode so the audience knows Mr. Honey is a horrible person, but this episode just paints him as a character who has no characterization whatsoever, that it just doesn't work. And it's just a constant cringy back and forth between the students and Mr. Honey, but all through song, and it just doesn't work and comes across as forced and uncomfortable. The episode did, however, begin hinting at Betty and Archie's little fling that they had, which is about one of the only positives I can think of for this musical episode, but even then, since we know how that turned out, it basically makes the episode worthless. The only decent thing about this musical episode is, as usual, the ending, which leaves on a cliffhanger of the core 4 singing together with a crowd, and Jughead realising the mysterious VHS tape recorder was watching. And it ends with that iconic tape of a reenactment of Betty killing Jughead, which honestly, in my opinion, is one of the best moments of season 4. It just unfortunately came in the worst episode ever. Finally, we come to season 5's musical episodes. Technically, this season does have 2 musical episodes, but one is the return of Josie and the Pussycats, which to me doesn't really count as a normal musical episode, as it just uses many different songs. It's mainly here just to reintroduce the characters, and it makes sense to do a musical episode as these characters are a band. It's still not great and doesn't fit that much with the vibe of the show, but I'm not going to really add it into this list. Of course, the main musical episode is Next to Normal, which currently is the lowest rated episode of Riverdale ever at 3.3 out of 10, overtaking Headwig and the Angry Inch. Basically, the musical episodes have hit rock bottom. Although, I actually have more positives to say about this one than negatives. It's still cringy and feels out of place, as all of the musical episodes do, but to me it actually felt more like a breath of fresh air because season 5 hasn't really been great on any levels. So this time the musical episode didn't annoy me as much as they usually do, and wasn't actually one of the worst episodes I've ever seen of this show. I mean, it would be very hard to beat season 4's. And I think the reason why this episode actually works is because it takes the musical genre and actually uses it to its advantage by using it to portray a very important and relevant theme to the characters, and that is grief, which none of the other musical episodes have ever really done before. Whether you like Betty's story arc in season 5 and the plot of the Highway Killer, I actually think this episode handles grief really well because it uses the musical as a storyteller and an advantage rather than just for the sake of it. And Riverdale has always done well at portraying a mature way of grief. Their most popular episode is of course the one where Fred Andrew passes away. Unfortunately, again, this musical episode isn't perfect and there are still bits that ruin it, but that's mainly from the other characters who bring back Riverdale's cringy nature, and to be honest, the other characters in this story aren't really needed and just seem to be there because they're main characters. Betty and Alice's relationship is the main centre of this episode, and it actually makes sense that they are singing because Alice is remembering when Polly, Betty and her went to see Next to Normal. And it deals with Alice trying to recreate a perfect family that she's always wanted but never had, and deals with all of those themes really well. I actually love how the episode mainly focuses on Betty and Alice singing together instead of a huge ensemble piece like they normally do. And seeing how Betty copes with the way Alice is acting is also done really well. It also seems to be like a nice send-off to the Cooper family, which basically by now is non-existent, but has been there since the beginning of the show. And I feel like this is shown again really well in the ending, where we see the entire cast at Polly's funeral singing together as the only ensemble song of the episode. I think it's respectful to the character and the people who are dealing with grief, and to me, it actually was pretty good. But clearly people disagree with me as it is rated as the lowest episode of all time, although maybe that's just because of how bad the musical episodes' reputations are. But anyway guys, that is the end of this video. I hope you have enjoyed it. If you have, make sure that you smash that like button down below and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Guys, I want to hear your opinions on what you think about the Riverdale musical episodes. There has been quite a few now, and it seems like we're not going to be getting rid of them at all for the next season and many seasons to come. They just seem like they're going to always be a staple of a Riverdale season. Do you actually like these musical episodes, or are they as annoying and cringy as most people think they are? Would you put them as your lowest rated episodes, or do you think maybe we should have a bit of sympathy for these musical episodes and maybe there is something good about them? Personally, I think season 5's episode is a nod in the right direction for what these musical episodes could become, because all of the original musical episodes to me were just absolutely dreadful. But let me know all your thoughts down below in the comments, and as always, we've been here on Gate of Theories. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.